David Banner. What's happening? This is David Banner. This is a very, very special edition of the David Banner podcast. Regina?
Yes.
Sally?
What's up?
That's what you all?
I'm cool. I'm cool today.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it. We had one of my mentors, the actual person who I would say changed the course of my life. Brother Anthony Browder.
All right.
How you doing, man?
I'm great, man. I'm great. Glad to be here with you.
Man, it's a long time coming, man.
Yes, sir.
I was telling a friend of mine one time, the people who would have the type of effect that you had on my life.
What kind of effect is that, man? I mean, you've been saying that. What kind of effect did that have on your life?
I probably would have been doing some other extracurricular activities if it wasn't for you, bro. but no, I'm serious. Like, you know, I would say an equivalent, a person who had the same amount of effect on me would be like a Malcolm, right? And Malcolm had transitioned before I was even born. You know, so to be able to even call you on the phone and get the level of information and the level of guidance, especially on enlightenment, bro, is very hard in these times, man. And I'm honored for you to be here.
Well, thank you, man. And I still remember the first call I got from you. It was near Christmas time, a number of years ago, and then just out the blue, man. You just called me, and we hit it off, man. Yeah. And so I'm grateful to be able to be in a position to impact your life favorably, such that you now can impact the lives of thousands of people all over the world, man.
And I got a check for you, man. We got to pay for our books, man.
I don't want to say anything. Yeah. I mean, you know, you making all this money. Yeah, I'm just off to the side.
I got a check for you, bro. Egyptology, bro.
Yes, sir.
I wanna start off quick, man. Can you explain to the people what Egyptology is?
Right. You know, there's no such thing as Europeology. There's no such thing as Spanishology. There's no such thing as Americanology. But there's Egyptology. There's Egyptology because Egypt is the oldest documented civilization known to mankind. It's the oldest continuously existing civilization on the planet. Over 3,000 years of African excellence. We have the first nation state in history. We have the first system of architecture, engineering, science, medicine. Everything that makes a civilization great began in Egypt. And oh, by the way, Egypt is in Africa. Don't let white folk fool you and think that it's somewhere in the Middle East. That's a lie that American reporter made up in the early 20th century. You know, it was a geopolitical term in order to separate Egypt from Africa because whoever controls the history of Egypt controls the history of the world. Right. So we're fighting to reclaim our proper place in world history and human history.
Okay. Tell me if I'm correct about this, and if I'm not, correct me. Are you the first descendant of Africans, or are you the first African American male to do an excavation in Egypt?
I'm the first person of African ancestry to fund and fully participate in an archeological excavation in Egypt, and we've been at it for 12 years.
Okay, hold on. How has that changed the course of your life?
Well, I mean, I never would imagine that a brother from the west side of Chicago would be funding an excavation on the west bank of Luxor. Okay. You know, so it's like beyond my imagination. But as I reflect back on my life, man, everything that I've done since I was born has been leading to this moment in time, you know, and it's simply a matter of me being attuned to the ancestors and doing what I'm born to do, you know, following the right folk. You know, you mentioned Malcolm was a profound inspiration for you. My inspiration came in the form of Ivan Van Sertima, John Henry Clark, and Asa Hilliard. So it was like those three brothers were like my cornerstone, and they showed me what it is that a man is supposed to do, and I've been following in their footsteps. And so that led to me having this opportunity in 2008 to meet this woman, this Russian-born American-trained Egyptologist by the name of Alina Pishtakova, who had discovered these two 25th Dynasty tombs, these two 2,700-year-old tombs. And because she was born in Russia and didn't understand American racism, she couldn't get funding to continue the work on this tomb. And at this time, it was costing $40,000 a year. And so she used her own money to fund this excavation. She maxed out her credit cards. She maxed out her 401k. She was tapping into her daughter's college tuition when I met her. 2 years into the project, had run out of money and was about to shut it down. And she gave me a personal tour of the tomb, and I could hear Asa Hilliard in one ear, I could hear Dr. Clark in the other ear, and saying, Tony, you need to move on this. So I said, look, I'll raise the funds, and we'll keep this thing going. So 12 years later, we have literally restored the history of the first 2 Kushite tombs built in Egypt. And in the process, walking in and out of this tomb, these 2 2,700-year-old tombs, man. And I've come to understand that they knew that there was no such thing as death. There was no such thing as death. There's only what the Africans refer to as the Rahimi Misu, the repetition of the birth, that we come back, and that we've always come back. And the quality of life we experience when we come back is based on the quality of life that we experienced when we were here before. So it's all one continuum. And all of this information is there if you know how to read it. And when you really begin to understand what this truth is, then it makes all these other truths just disappear in the wind. You know, this religious truth about heaven and hell, that stuff ain't real, man. It's all made up. It's all made up, and it's all driven by fear. It's all driven by fear. Once you understand the profound truth, then all these other belief systems just dissipate. And then it's a matter of how do you get this information to the people with the greatest need to know so that they can understand what this game is all about and then live their real lives.
How old were you when you first started testing the things that you believed in?
1977. 1977, so I would have been 26 years old. Earth, Wind & Fire had just come out with the album Spirit. And Charles Stephanie, who was their producer, Charles Stephanie, who had created the Earth, Wind & Fire sound, died. And they dedicated that Spirit album to him. And it was the first album where Earth, Wind & Fire used Egyptian symbols. So the 9 members of the group were in 3 pyramids, and they had 3 pyramids, 3 white pyramids in the background. The album was named Spirit, dedicated to the spirit of Charles Stephanie, and every album since then has had Egyptian themes. 1977, February 21st, 1977 was when I met Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, and he taught me that the Egyptians were black. 1977 was when I went to see the King Tut exhibit in Washington, D.C. after listening to Ivan Van Sertima. And I'm looking at this image of this boy King. I'm seeing my face in his face. Right. And all of a sudden, the world just opens up. And I see this whole new reality. And I discovered then what I refer to as forbidden knowledge. Books written by these scholars, brothers and sisters who've been telling this same story for decades, that Egypt is in Africa. And Egypt was a country that was founded by indigenous African people. And I realized then that I've been lied to all of my life. You know, I'd gone to predominantly black schools all my life on the west side of Chicago, Howard University, and I was never taught any of this information. So, of course, I was a little angry. But then I realized, you know, people can only teach you what they know. And if nobody knows this information, if this is forbidden information, matter of fact, I remember Van Sertima told me that writing that book that came before Columbus, The African Presence in America, was the end of his academic career. And I realized that folk have a vested interest in making sure that we never know the truth of who we are. And if we don't know who we are, then we will be whoever they say we are. So this power, man, this freedom that came with knowing myself just excited me. And I made my first trip to Egypt with Dr. Ben in 1980. And I saw with my own eyes evidence that validated that I had been lied to all my life. And I decided when I came back that I needed to get this information out to folks. So that was 40 years ago. And I'll be making my 60th trip to Egypt in September.
One of the things that I said that I was going to make sure that you were able to do on this trip was to be able to talk about some of the stuff that you want to talk about where you are now. I know most people are expecting me to talk about From the Browder File.
We'll talk about that too. I mean, I don't mind.
But I promised you were going to be able to talk about what you want to talk about now. We said that we were going to talk about spirituality and where you are spiritually. Can you explain that to us? It's sort of hard to ask the question, to frame the question, because you have to have a point of reference.
No, I got a point of reference, man.
All right, well, let's go to
I mean, I got a point of reference. Life. Right. Life. We all got to deal with life. My son just died 2 weeks ago, right? And you know, this is my stepson. I hate using the word stepson. This is my daughter's brother. You remember my daughter, Atlantis, right? And as I'm preparing her for his death, he had a stroke 30 months ago and was hospitalized, paralyzed, was on dialysis. So I knew that that he wasn't going to make it, and I knew that his quality of life was gone, and that his only way out was death, and that death was not the end. Death is a doorway to the next life, and that we had to prepare ourselves to release him for his sake. And so it's about us understanding that there is life after life. And the only reason I can have this quality of conversation with my daughter is because she's been with me in this tomb for the last 10 years. We've been in these burial chambers, man, finding some incredible things, having very serious daddy-daughter conversations about how is it that I'm not a licensed Egyptologist, I'm not an archeologist, but how is it that I'm here finding these things? I mean, what is it that my life dictated that I follow this path and that she's here following this path with me, So understanding, to me, what life is all about. And this is a continuation of the process because my mother passed 5 years ago, right? And my mother passed at home. It was home hospice. She didn't want to be in the hospital dying. And so my daughter and I were there caring for her last weeks of life, and we were at her bedside when she took her last breath, and to be able to prepare the way for her soul based on what I know from studying African history, that when your physical body expires, your soul goes on to another level, and there's specific things that you can do in order to prepare the soul to leave the body and go to this place. You see in Egyptian papyri and what have you, this scene of the weighing of the soul, where the soul has to go into the double hall of Ma'at and declare their innocence by reciting 42 admonitions of Ma'at, which is just a means by which you can model your life, because not everybody can live up to all these 42 declarations of innocence, but it's just a platform, to model your life after, so that when this time comes, you can say that I have not robbed, I have not stolen, I have not defrauded offerings, I have not done these things, and then your heart could be as light as a feather. And then you can be prepared to move into the next phase of your existence. So my mother passed on October the 30th in 2015, and then 46 days later, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing has a stroke. And I'm in her hospital room when she's on life support, and her sister Lauren says, Frances would not want to be hooked up to this monitor. She didn't believe that when you died, that was the end. She believed that we came back, and there's something that we should do. So there were about 6 of us in the room, and there was a sister, a good friend of mine, who's an Akan priestess. So she said, look, there are things that we can do to pave the way for her soul to leave her body. And we set things up in this room, and we prayed, and we chanted, and we released her soul, and we invited the soul of her parents and her grandparents to be there to receive her. So, when you can take these abstract things that we've been reading about in history, and I've been studying about traveling to Egypt, and put them into practical application, right? When you prepare somebody that you love to leave the physical world and go into the ancestral realm and open the door for them, then that's a powerful thing. And so, as I said, I've come to understand that there is no death. There's only life after life, and that life is a continuum. And when you understand this, it makes you see everything differently. When you know that, how you treat somebody in this life is going to determine how you're going to be treated in the next life. It makes you want to do right. It makes you want to do good. So when you call me, man, and ask me questions, I'm obligated to talk to you, man, because one, you're asking me for advice, guidance, and wisdom, which I have, which I've been preparing myself to receive, and now you're coming to me, so I have an obligation to share this information with you because I know you're going to share it with somebody else. So I'm creating all this positive karma, man, that's going to make life better for me. It's going to make life better for you. It's going to make life better for everybody who's within our sphere, and that's how you play this thing forward. That's how you neutralize racism and ignorance and all these things that we're dealing with in this lifetime in order to make sure that when we come back, we at a higher plane, man, and we can function on another level and create the world that we were born to create. I couldn't put that in the Browder file. But, that's where my head is going. And, so come on, ask me something, man. I'm here. Come on, brother.
I feel like y'all familiar. Yeah, that's what I was doing. Yeah, I don't know why. So, what, Regina?
I was going to say, I do have a question.
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
Browder files, you mentioned about whoever controls the present controls.
Mm-hmm.
everything. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a quote from George Orwell. George Orwell wrote in 1984, right? Whoever controls the present controls the past. Whoever controls the past. Wait, hold on.
Whoever controls the past controls the future. Whoever controls the present controls the past.
So the most important time in history is the present moment, because the present moment connects you to everything that was and everything that will be. Now, the key thing about that statement, George Orwell wrote that book. That was a statement from his book 1984. 1984 was written by George Orwell, a British writer, science fiction writer, in 1947. And the book was originally entitled 1948. And it was about this dystopian world that he saw Europe coming into and the world coming into right after World War II. And so his publisher said, no, man, this book is too depressing. You can't, no, this is not going to work. Transpose the last two numbers, make it about the future, then it becomes something that people can relate to. Why? Because people are afraid to deal with the present. But if you separate them from the present moment, and either you deal with the past or into the future, they now can internalize that information, right? So if you fast forward to George Lucas, Star Wars, how does every Star Wars movie begin? How does every Star Wars movie begin?
With a date, right?
Come on, give me. I mean, just
that whole rundown, the stuff you got to read.
Yeah.
So what's the first line you see in every Star Wars film?
Not far in the future.
Close.
Uh-oh.
What is it?
I don't know.
No. All right, let me give it to y'all.
Give it to
y'all
us,
ain't
please.
watching movies. You're supposed to be
And
paying attention
I'm a
to this
Star
stuff.
Wars fan.
Every Star Wars movie, a long time ago in a galaxy
Far,
far
far away.
See, you know it,
You're right.
Now, just think about this. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and then you see a spaceship, then you see robots, and you see all this, and you think you're dealing with the future. But no, this happened a long time ago in the past, in a galaxy far, far away. So it's psychological displacement, right? So it's to separate you from the present moment and talk about the same things you're dealing with right now in a different context, so you can relate to it, right? You can deal with Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader and these forces of evil.
And they give you different color skin, so you won't feel so bad about watching them cut each other up and shoot each other up.
Absolutely.
Right.
But dig this though. That whole story of Star Wars is the story of ancient Kemet. That whole story of Star Wars is the story of Heru, Asar, and Aset. George Lucas got that from Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth, right? Who wrote about the ancient Kemetic story of Asar, Set, and Heru is the foundational myth of humanity. And so George Lucas was a philosophy major in college when he read Joseph Campbell, and then when he realized the power of philosophy and the power of myth, he said, I'm going into films, because I can use films to tell stories about myths. And that's when he did this Star Wars thing, and he's taken everybody to another level, man. So it's about separating people from the present moment and then telling a story that is old as time, right? And these stories are African stories. Everybody is built their fortunes on the back of Africa. And African people don't even realize it.
And the descendants of Africans run away from it.
Yeah, because we've been socialized to love the master, love our oppressor. But once we know our real story, then it changes the game, man. It changes everything.
What do you think of some of the some practical steps that we can take to start moving in that direction?
A basic step is to love yourself. We've been taught to hate ourselves, you know. And what has happened to us is unnatural, and it's unparalleled in the annals of human history. No people on the planet have gone through what we've gone through. We should be exterminated right now, but the mere fact that we're here speaks to a power that's inside of us. And so our oppressor knows that as long as they can keep us disconnected from that power, they can continue to control and manipulate it. So they teach us to hate each other, hate on each other, and believe that everything that is of greatness and value comes from Europe and not Africa. So as long as we look to the European for our guidance and our savior, as long as we believe God looks like our oppressor, then we'll never look at the God inside of us, right? So it's about changing that narrative. And that's what timing is. We've reached a point in human history where European control and domination is coming to an end. You can see it happening all over the world. So when they fall, when their civilization fall, we do not have to fall with them. We can go back. So to read, man, to read, and that's the reason why when our ancestors were stolen from Africa for 444 years, from 1444 to 1888, every European nation, with the exception of Russia, went in and stole African people, enslaved them, and sold them all over the world and made fortunes. And one of the things that they had to ensure that they did was to separate us from our historical and cultural memory and make us believe that we were less than, right? So reading is a gift, man. Reading is our passport to the past, our passport to the future. And so just read, like Ray Winbush says, read 30 minutes a day. I don't care what you read. It could be a comic book. Just get in the habit of reading, right? Everything that has ever been recorded about anything that's ever happened in the world is written down somewhere. And once you begin to cultivate an appetite with reading, your mind begins to expand and your soul says, hey, man, I've been waiting for you. I'm here to tell you and show you things and teach you things. And that's why you called me. You read the Browder file, man, and it ignited something inside of you that was waiting for this flame to be lit. And look at you now, bro.
That was something that that I learned recently, that you don't learn anything. You're putting God back together. Like, it's all in you.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
The DNA, it's we all made of the same matter God is made out of.
Absolutely.
So an example that they gave in the book is, like, have you ever been tutored? And then they said one thing, and that one thing ignited everything, and you knew the whole subject.
Right.
So putting it back together. What is something that you've learned recently, like within that last 2-3 years, that has pushed your consciousness to another level, that's challenged your way of thinking?
Well, God, that's a good question, man. That's a good question. All right. Well, look, there's this new body of science called epigenetics. Epigenetics, right? And that you mentioned DNA. We carry our DNA, and scientists can take one cell from anywhere in your body and clone another you. So that means the essence of everything that we are is in every part of our body, right? And, they talk about cloning and all these other things, but what they don't talk about is that within that DNA is the memory of all of your ancestors that you carry around in your body. So you're carrying the memory of all of your ancestors going back 10, 15, 20, 30,000 years. And that when you are in a proper state of alignment and attunement with your real self, then those ancestors will speak to you. They will inspire you. They will drop knowledge on you, and the ideas just pop into your head, and you see the end. You see it, right? And so I've just walking the path that I've been walking, I've been more open to receive that information now, and stuff is coming to me, man. And it's not the type of thing. I'm not the type of person who's afraid of this stuff, because I know this is reality. This is reality. All this other stuff is just an illusion. And when you know that you contain within you all the knowledge that ever existed, and you create that proper space where you're still and you're silent and you tap into that information, and it can come through your grandmama, it can come to your mama, it can come to your mama, and you get one word or one image, and that just opens up a door that connects you with everything there is, and you begin to live your authentic life. And that's the thing that everybody possesses, man. But we live in a society that has to oppress that reality, because you can't be controlled and manipulated if you know who you are. So to be free is to be able to understand the power that you possess, and then to use that power to make life better for every life that matters to you. That's the path that I'm on now, man.
Yeah. We had that conversation. We had that conversation. Why you were doing excavation? Has there ever been a spiritual moment or connection that you or your daughter have made while y'all were working in Egypt?
Yeah. It was in July of 2010, right? July of 2010, and we started excavating. Now, we're excavating this tomb of this priest named Karakamen, right? And the tomb is built 20 feet underground. and it's made of 2 large rooms. Like this room that we're in now, this studio that we're in now, this would be, say, the size of the small room, the second pillared hall. And then the first pillared hall is about twice this size. And all of this is carved out of limestone, right? In columns, right? And every square inch is covered with hieroglyphics and carvings, and everything is painted, right? So we're excavating in this room, and it's filled, from the ground to 20 feet up is all debris. And so we got to excavate, right? We got to excavate, remove all of this debris, and we find these fragments, pieces of the ceiling and the floor and the wall and the pilasters, and each piece has to be cleaned and numbered. And we must have had about 60, 70 people working for us at the time. And I'm paying for all this. I'm financing all of this, and money is tight. Whenever money gets tight, then I got to catch the boat and go across to the East Bank with my ATM card, pull out a couple of grand so we can make payroll on Thursday. So the money was tight, right? And payroll is Thursday, and I'm saying, look, man, I
sound like the David Banner podcast. I had to walk across the street to the ATM. Dirtbag Corey need his money.
So it was late July, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm facing the reality. I don't have unlimited funds, but I'm here doing good work. And so I said, look, and then so I'm calling on this priest, Karakamen. His name, Karakamen. Ka means spirit, Raket means knows or is known by. Amen is an African word that identifies the unseen presence of God. So his name means the unseen presence of God knows my spirit. So I'm reaching out to the brother and said, look, Karak, we're here to restore your tomb. We didn't come here as tomb robbers. We're here to restore your tomb, restore your name so that you can live again. And I need your help right now. You know, I know that we're going to find your burial chamber, and I need something big. I need something big to talk about back home so I can get some more money. And we can't afford to just dig anywhere. Tell me where we should be digging. Tell me where. So I made the request, and a voice came to me that I know was more inspiration than imagination and said, have them dig right over here. So I grabbed a couple of guys, had them start digging, and I'm off doing something else. And about 2 hours later, Alina yells, Tony, we found it. Found steps, 2 steps leading down into the ground, right? And so they started digging. I had to come back to the States to pick up a group for a study tour. By the time I came back, they had dug out the steps. Steps took them into a burial compartment, another 10 feet underground. And in that burial compartment, there was a shaft, a 6 feet by 5 foot shaft that went down another 30 feet into the earth. And that shaft led to the burial chamber of this priest, Karakaman, some 70 feet underground. So by the time I came back with my daughter. So we finished the tour, and then we stayed behind another 2 weeks to work at the site. So my daughter and I spent a week, just the 2 of us, 70 feet underground in this burial chamber, excavating and finding things and having serious daddy-daughter conversation, man. Right. So, you know, that to me is one confirmation that I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm listening to my ancestors. I'm petitioning them, and I'm responding to their requests, and I'm seeing the payoff. So I know that as long as I continue this level of exchange, 1, that I'm protected, 2, that I'm doing what it is that I'm supposed to do, and as long as I maintain that relationship, then things will continue to unfold exactly the way that they're supposed to unfold. And to be able to share that with my daughter, man, is priceless. Priceless.
Nah, I got a question. It's something I always wanted to ask somebody like of your caliber who like searches all this and, you know, get into everything. So, like from the beginning of time, we was kings and black people was, you know, all these great people before us. So then how did it flip that we just was able to just become slaves like that then if we was already so great before?
All right. A good question. I mean, it's a good question. And it's a question that's worthy of serious consideration, all right? So let's go with the first part. We were kings. Yeah, but come on, let's be realistic, man. Less than 1/10 of 1% of the population were kings and queens. Vast majority of people were musicians, were artists, were doctors, were teachers, were healers, were builders. You know, so the vast majority of our folk were hardworking people who made the king and queen look good. made them feel comfortable, right? And then there were folk who were farmers and laborers. So it's a whole hierarchy of power, right? So don't just focus on the kings and queens because they were the freaks. I mean, their numbers were small. The vast majority of folk were the ones who kept everything going. And so we did this longer than anybody else. Africans were the first human beings on the planet, right? We've been here as human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens, for at least 300,000 years, right? Slavery is a blip in our history, right? If the history of African people was a book of 1,000 pages, the story of our enslavement begins on page 996, and it's only 2 paragraphs long. The timeline.
He was the one that was his.
Yeah. So we got to have context. We got to have context so that anytime anybody tells you that your history begins in slavery, they're lying to you, right? And remember what I said about the DNA, and we're carrying within us the memory of all of these ancestors. So geneticists know this. Now, this is some relatively new information, right? Africans have been living on the planet at least 300,000 years and lived on this planet alone. Geneticists have determined that the African genes that mutated, lost their melanin, and became white or Caucasians, those genes are just 7,000 to 8,000 years old, which means that we have a 292,000-year head start on the people who have flipped the script on us and made us think that we were slaves. No, it's a game. It's a hustle, man. It's a hustle. So when I talk about the importance of reading and knowing yourself, loving yourself, as soon as you embrace who you are, you undo all of that stuff and you plug into your real essence, man. And that's what comes through and allows you to recreate what was created before. And that's what this whole process is all about.